Hello there, you perfectly lovely little people. My name is Sarah, and this evening I'm going to be reading a chapter from Peter Pan and Wendy by JM Barrie. This one is called Rescued from the Rock. It was a great fight, although a short one. 8 small boys armed with daggers and Peter Pan, that makes 9, against 3 rather large grown-up pirates. Each of them hung all over with pistols and guns, knives, cutlasses and other dangerous things. And of course, there was Hook's iron claw, which was the worst of all. Tootles was wounded and Wendy was feeling faint, but the rest managed to conquer Smee and Starkey by attacking them from 3 sides at once. The defeated ruffians fled back to their ship. A pity they could not have been killed, but it is so difficult to fight properly in the water and on the slippery rocks. Meanwhile, the boys all kept the promise they'd made to Peter long ago. Not one of them went near Hook. Peter was waiting to meet with Hook, but the pirate captain was so cunning that there was no chance to get at him until he climbed up Marooners Rock to get a breath of air. At the same moment, Peter climbed up on the opposite side and they met, with their faces almost touching. Peter was about to stab the captain when he saw that Hook was lower down the rock than he was. So he held out his hand to help his enemy up so that they might fight fair. And the ill-natured Hook bit him. Peter's hand was hurt, but his feelings were much more hurt. It was so very unfair of Hook. Though, of course, you wouldn't expect a man like that to behave nobly. Anyhow, Peter was so taken aback that he was quite helpless, and while he stared at his dreadful enemy, Hook clawed him twice with the iron claw. All seemed lost, for Hook would have finished him off with one more clawing when tick-tock, 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 the crocodile was swarming up the rock. Hook only just managed to escape. The boys saw him, white with fear, swimming wildly towards his ship. They would have swum after him and cheered on the crocodile, but they were rather uneasy because they couldn't find either Peter Pan or Wendy. After shouting to them all over the lagoon and getting no answer, they went home in the pirate's dinghy, which was drifting about by itself. Peter and Wendy could not answer because they had both fainted. They were lying on the rock and the tide was racing fast, and it would soon cover the rock. Soon they were roused by a mermaid, trying to pull Wendy into the water. Peter drew her up again. She did not seem to understand what danger they were in. He showed her that the rock was nearly under water. "You see," he said, "it is getting smaller and smaller." "Then we ought to go," said Wendy cheerfully. "Yes," said Peter, whose wounds were hurting badly. "Shall we swim or fly, Peter?" "Do you think you could swim or fly to the island without me, Wendy?" Wendy said she was too tired. Then Peter had to tell her that he was too much wounded to help her. He said, "Hook has clawed me. I can't fly and I can't swim." It was quite plain that very soon they would both be drowned. It simply couldn't be helped. And while they sat there waiting, with the water rising steadily around them, something light and papery came and brushed against Peter, as if it were saying, "Can I be of any use?" It was the tail of a kite. "It's Michael's kite," said Peter. Michael had made it and lost it some days before. Peter suddenly thought it might help them. He caught the tail and pulled the kite to him. Quite a big one it was. "It could lift Michael," he said. "Why can't it carry you, Wendy?" "Both of us, Peter." "No, it can't carry 2. I know, because Michael and Curly tried together." Wendy said she wouldn't go without him, but Peter tied the tail around her and said, "Goodbye, Wendy," and pushed her off the rock. The kite soared up in the air. It didn't seem to mind Wendy's weight one bit. In a few minutes she was out of sight, and Peter was alone on what was left above water of the rock. It was a very small bit now, only just room for his feet. The moon rose and the lagoon grew lighter. The mermaids came up from their coral caves and sang sweet, sad songs to the moon, but they never noticed Peter standing there, all lonely. For just 1 minute he felt, well, sort of rather afraid, for the first time in his life. Most likely it would be the last time too. In another minute, however, he had forgotten about being afraid. He was smiling and excited. His heart was going bump, 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 like a drum beating inside him. It sounded to Peter as if it were saying, "To die will be an awfully big adventure." The mermaids, when they had sung all the songs they knew, went back one by one to their bedrooms under the sea. Peter heard the tiny bells on the doors ringing, ding, ding, as the mermaids shut their doors behind them. The water were now lapping around his feet, and there was nothing to do but wait until they washed him off the rock. He saw a curious thing floating on the lagoon. It looked like a piece of paper. He thought it might be part of the kite until he noticed that it was moving against the tide. Indeed, it seemed to be trying to come up to him, and presently it did, right up to the rock. It's not a piece of paper, it was the Neverbird, on her nest with eggs in it. She had managed to steer with her wings, but was very tired. She had come to rescue Peter because, as you have heard, he had been very kind to her when her nest fell out of the tree. She told Peter she wanted to give him her nest to get to shore in, but it took him such a long time to understand her that they grew quite cross and called each other names, until at last the Neverbird gave the nest one great shove and flew up off the eggs. Then Peter saw what she meant, and he was really grateful. He thought it would be a shame to squash the eggs, so he put them into a deep tarpaulin hat, which had been left by the pirate Starkey during the fight. It was quite watertight, and he set it afloat. The Neverbird was ever so pleased. She got into the hat, Peter got into the nest, and they cheered each other like mad. When they drifted apart from each other, and it was only a little while before Peter reached the house under the ground, nearly as soon as Wendy, who had been some time coming home because the kite liked carrying her and had not hurried. Everyone was delighted, as everybody else, and as Peter had to be bandaged, the other boys wanted bandages too. And what with telling their adventures and one thing or another, they were several hours late for bed. It was perfectly lovely. It was quite exciting. Anyway, my littles, I hope you've all cleaned your teeth. I hope you have washed your hands very, very carefully with soap and water. And now I want you to snuggle up into your beds and give yourself a great big cuddle. Night, night.